Hello, hello. Audio. There we go. Okay. Tiny hiccup, but we're online. How is everybody doing? Awesome stuff. How's the week going? How's the week going? Yet another chat from the president incoming. Let's hope it's some good news. Yeah, oof. It's Thursday, but this week, this has been a tough week. Work's been crazy. Work's been hectic. So, yeah, I'm glad the weekend is around the corner. My 3-month-old went for his vaccinations today. So that was hectic. He was not happy with 2 injections, let me tell you. But yeah, he's all right now and chilled out. He's on some meds, so that'll help him sleep through the night. But yeah, we've been getting his injections done at the pediatrician, but I give them a call this morning and they basically said, nope, sorry, we're closed. If you admit yourself into the hospital, then you can request us as your pediatrician, but otherwise we are not seeing anyone due to the lockdown. So yeah, so we had to make a plan. Fortunately, the likes of Clicks and Discam are still doing those vaccinations, so we had to get it done there. But yeah, otherwise it's all good. I saw something that quite a few of these other streamers have been tweeting about, which is this a lot of artificial intelligence engines use your graphics card because the new graphics cards have lots of low powered processors. So like thousands of processors compared to the maybe 4, maybe 8 to 16 that your normal PC has. Graphics processors in many cases can have thousands. And each one is not nearly as powerful, but the fact that they can split up a large task into so many tiny chunks and do it all simultaneously is very useful to the way AI works generally. And so these guys came up with an algorithm, and I haven't read into it too much, but this one guy decided to use the graphics card to power the AI to manage his audio, like for YouTube or for Twitch, to kind of manage his audio and to filter out background noise, to bring your voice through more clearly, and to kind of fill in those gaps from what's there, from what the microphone picks up, and what the AI algorithm kind of learns that, you know what, this is what you should sound like. And it kind of fills those gaps and it filters out a lot of background noise. And from some of the demos I've seen, this thing is fantastic. And it's especially funny that you're doing audio AI on a graphics card. So that was pretty interesting, and I think very unexpected. A lot of people didn't expect someone to come up with a tool like that. So yeah, unfortunately, it's based on the NVIDIA RTX engine, and I do not have one of those bad boys. Mine is an AMD something or the other graphics card, and unfortunately, despite it having a, I would say an equivalent amount of firepower, It just does not actually have the engine itself that makes this algorithm and engine possible. So yeah, but perhaps it gives me a reason to go out and get a new graphics card. And one really needs a reason, only the budget. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Otherwise, I hope everyone is well, is staying safe, and is taking care of themselves. This period of isolation is not just about being safe and healthy, but it's about being mentally safe and emotionally happy as well. So use that time and try to make your life a little bit better, a little bit brighter. On that note, let's kick off. What is Code to Career? The aim of Code to Career is to create a community for software developers, especially those with little to no experience. It is a place for them to get information on what to expect in the working world. I've worked with many juniors and interns over the years, and this is my way of trying to help them bridge that gap when entering the professional space. This community that we are creating, if you wish to join in, hang out, chat, we have a Discord server available. If you just scroll down a bit, or if you're watching on YouTube, check the comments or check the information for the video, you will find a link to the Discord server. Register, join in, ask your questions, just be a part of the community. We are here to help. If you haven't seen any of the previous videos, I am uploading them to YouTube. Again, if you scroll down a bit, the link is there. Go through and listen. Again, there's YouTube comments, so please feel free to ask questions there as well. We're here to assist and we're here to help. A few disclaimers. I am not claiming to be any kind of expert. I will share what I have learned, what I have seen, what I know many employees struggle with. But not everything works for everyone. You have to pick and choose what makes sense for you, what fits with your style and your attitude. We will talk about things that can seem very abstract. That is what happens when you have little or no experience. You have no way of understanding unless you've been in those situations, those environments. But remembering what we talk about will shine a light on these situations when we encounter them. There are a wide range of companies, of cultures and environments out there. So there is a decent chance that we talk about things that you will never encounter in your career. Nonetheless, forewarned is forearmed. There are exceptions to probably every single thing I say. Situations are rarely simple, and it is only our lack of understanding that make situations seem simple. Finally, I am South African, and my experience and knowledge is based around the South African market and South African companies. Since these videos are available for anyone in the world to watch, please keep that localization in mind. Right. So, the topic of discussion today is being an employee. What does it mean for you to be an employee? How do companies consider you? How do they think about you? What do they struggle with? What do we struggle with to communicate with the companies that we're working with, that we're applying to? That's what we're going to kind of go through today. There are different types of developers because there are different types of people. Some are literal, some are creative, some are focused, some are slow, and the very rare ones actually like documentation. And every combination that we can think of. So for every developer, it is of massive importance to try to find a company where your particular style fits well. The other side of this coin is that companies are going to treat you differently depending on those factors, on those differences. I often see people getting upset that one person gets something that others don't, or some special treatment. But what these people don't realize is that if you make a big fuss about it, then no one gets any special treatment. And the reality is, everyone is better off with the option of special consideration. You may not get any specialized treatment today, but you never know what life will put on your shoulders tomorrow. And it's always helpful to know that you can go to your manager or to HR and discuss your situation. And know that there's a chance that y'all can make a plan to help out. That's different from what others get in the department or in the company. So you're going to become part of the group that makes these decisions and influence how people think about these decisions. So be smart about it, and don't just be greedy and want everything that everyone else has. Small additional point from there. The idea of herd mentality. Especially if you're in a larger department, herd mentality is the idea of following and doing what everyone else is doing, especially those who are vocal about it. Safety in numbers, you may think. But there is a counterpoint to this, and it's in the form of the saying, one person can be smart, but people are dumb, panicky animals. You are smart to always listen to what the herd is rumbling about. Never say no to knowledge, but consider the source and treat that knowledge suspiciously. Always think for yourself. Don't get drawn into the herd due to pressure or emotion. Make a conscious decision when you act, not a panicked one. Situations will get stressful. So don't burn your bridges. It takes a lot of willpower, but learn to bite your tongue. Things will definitely get stressful and crazy, but something said in a moment of anger can follow you around the entire industry like a bad smell. It's often a small world of developers in any local area, and many of them talk to each other. This includes consultants, managers, even the recruiters, and people in charge of hiring people. So, learn to manage your anger. Learn to identify when situations are getting bad. Don't get yourself pushed into a corner due to life where you have to go and ask maybe for a pay raise or maybe for an unusual amount of leave or leave around a very bad time, and into a situation where the company saying no is really problematic for you. Try to think ahead, try to plan ahead, try not to get yourself into these situations. There are many hidden costs to accepting a position. So always keep these in mind when looking at the offer that's given, and also as a form of asking questions in response to to the offers that have been given to you. Things such as travel time, where do you live? Where are their offices? If it's a 40-minute trip in traffic both ways, that's a cost. That's a cost that you're gonna pay for. You're gonna arrive at work just a little bit more tired. You're going to not look forward to the drive home at the end of the day when you're way more tired. If you plan on either doing some work from home after hours, whether to improve your own skills and do your own learning, or some other time where you would need concentration, that there's the much higher chance that you would not be able to manage. So travel time is always a consideration. Along with travel time, fuel costs. If you're getting slightly more, but for a position that's an hour's drive away, compared to a position that's very close by, that is definitely something that you got to balance accordingly. The idea of total cost, not just what is your net amount on your payslip. Along the same lines, vehicle maintenance. Then, overtime expectations. Often, different companies, or even in certain cases, different departments within the company, have different expectations around overtime. Sometimes they're very clear and upfront about it. Other times, they could definitely be more clear about it. The worst situations I've seen is where companies kind of spread the message of, oh, no, it's maybe you'll have to do an overnight on call once every 2 months. And so for most developers, you can manage that one night in 60. That's not unreasonable. And for companies with those official overtime setups, there will be proper compensation. However, sometimes that one day in 60 becomes 2 weeks, and simply because sometimes people leave, the team grows smaller, and someone still has to do those shifts. So these are the kind of things you got to keep in mind. These risks and costs that come with not only not knowing about something like overtime expectations, but the considerations as to how that can change given time as team members leave, as those who are in a more senior position may say, nope, I'm a senior, I'm a team lead, and I can't do the overtime anymore. I can't do the on-call anymore. And now suddenly that's one less person to spread around. So everyone else has to pick up the shortage. And then as now the remaining people are doing more work, what ends up happening is now there's more pressure for some of them to quit. Because they may say, no, listen, now it's just getting way too stressful. I have a family, I have kids, I'm a senior, I can't do this, I'm out. And if that's going to be a problem, I'll start looking elsewhere, because now it's become a case of it's non-negotiable. And now suddenly that's two people out, and the load on every of the remaining person's shoulders gets that much heavier and creates more pressure for more individuals to quit. And suddenly, before you know it, there's 5 guys doing a rotating 1 week at a time shift, and no one's happy. But you have no choice. So those are the kind of risks that you run into, especially early in your career, where you have a lot less say in what you can and can't do. So those are a few examples of some of the hidden costs of accepting a position outside of just your compensation that's been agreed upon. So do try to be aware of those and be aware of the dangers, but also, as is often the case with dangers, there can also be opportunities. So if you're the kind of person who can do a lot of overtime, I know guys who've with only 2 or 3 years of experience, for the next 5 years, they will make more money due to their overtime and on-call pay than their actual basic salary. They're essentially doubling what they're earning. If you're in a kind of scenario where you can take advantage of that, it is something that can be quite helpful, at least financially. But of course, it's overtime, it's on call, it comes with a price. Along the same lines, when considering positions, it's not all about the money. Company culture, policies like maternity benefits, work-life balance, remote work options, all of these make a big difference. Some of these won't apply to you as a junior, but it's important to pay attention and to also take part in these discussions, since you may be a senior in that same company one day, and how open they are to these ideas become much more important at that point. I'm going to chat a little bit about how demand affects hires and offers currently. And this is based around what I've seen in Durban, but also in South Africa in general. There is a lot of demand for developers. Many companies have reached the point where they can't pay developers more. There are only so many banks, so many large companies that are willing to hire large amounts of developers and have seemingly bottomless budgets to pay them. The vast majority of developers are not hired by those companies. They are hired by much smaller companies who have much smaller budgets and have to have a tighter balance and sense of management around their employees. So in these cases, many of these companies are open to ideas on how they can help you and make working in their environment and their culture more appealing. Admittedly, outside of giving you more money. Some companies are doing things like they have a PlayStation or an Xbox in the office, and so every lunchtime there's a gaming tournament going on, either a FIFA tournament or some other gaming tournament. Companies are doing things like having competitions based around any number of things. Funniest employee of the month. Someone who's got the highest score on some sort of coding tournament. There's many different ways I've seen that kind being applied, and it's something that really makes an environment so much more interesting and appealing to be a part of, because you're not just spending all of your time working. Even if that working is personal development or actually working for immediate work that needs to be done for the company. So think about these. Think about how what you do for perhaps for hobbies, perhaps in your spare time, can be integrated into these systems. And as you join these companies, ask these questions. Ask them, how about this idea? There's this other thing I do. Perhaps we can integrate it into part of this monthly prize process, and bring these to the table to try to make the environment more interesting. It's not just going to help you, it's going to help everyone. It's going to raise the mood in the company. It's going to make everyone more productive. It's going to make everything less stressful, and everyone is going to be happier for it. So, just two things about how companies think about employees. And this is not something that we often see because most of the time, those individuals we communicate with are our managers, our team leads. But as an employee, as a developer, there are members who are in HR, or they are people who are in the finance department. And they view you as an individual very differently. Um, in some companies, I see them keep track of something called the cost per line of code. Essentially, how much they're paying you, how many lines of code are you producing in that time, and how much is that cost per line of code. And for some of them, they use that as some sort of statistic to make decisions. Myself, a line of code is meaningless because it's about the quality of that line of code, not the line of code itself. For companies that track their employees using these sorts of mechanisms, I've seen many individuals who will spend time basically jippoing the algorithm. They know, they go and read up on how they're being monitored, what rules are kind of being used to monitor them, and they essentially write the code to make sure they're getting maximum value out of those algorithms. And it's dangerous because the aim is to get the best quality code, not to to do it with the minimum number of changes or in terms of lines of code or any of these other metrics that companies use. They in the long run they end up doing more harm than good. Um, Companies, for every employee, have essentially a cost. What it costs the company per employee, per hour, in some cases per day, just for that employee to exist. And it consists of things like the light bill, rent. Um, if it's a big development company, coffee. There are all of these costs that come in that basically says this is what the company is paying per employee just for them to be able to work. Outside of actually paying them their actual salary, this is what it costs the company to be able to allow this individual to work. So it's always interesting to try to find out what that number is, and not everyone is willing to share it with you. But if you chat to people, there's a reasonable chance, or in some cases, you may even find it on your payslip. Um, some companies have very comprehensive payslips that they give to their employees, and if you learn how to read those payslips, you can actually find what this number is. And it's always very interesting to realize that, you know what, in some cases it's costing the company a few hundred rands, or maybe 1,000 rand just for you to sit, just for you to be able to sit at work for a day. So it's something that is part of you being an employee, because it's part of what companies take into consideration um, for you as an individual. All right. Few companies are well wired to manage developers. They historically come from a framework that's aimed at much more standardized employees. And so they really struggle to understand developers as employees. From a finance perspective, an employee kind of brings an amount of value according to their role. Um, uh, Somebody who's sitting behind a support desk fielding support calls, or somebody who is in a debtors clerk, for example. They have a very fixed cost and they have very fixed delivery, and so it's well defined what you're paying for and what you're getting out of this employee. And for many employees across the company, this is how it works, and largely it's correct. Um, it's it's very fixed, and then, like I said, usually it's correct. But with developers, as we've discussed previously, even within one role, even within one position, if you have 10 of those individuals, there can be a wide range of difference between what many would consider the best in terms of output and the worst in terms of output. And not all output is good output. So there are many nuances to it as well, and measuring becomes incredibly difficult. From measuring output to handling differences, it's usually not great. So there's a lot to this, and it's really difficult to talk about. Here are some general pointers when speaking to your manager, when speaking to HR, when speaking to individuals within your company from the perspective of being a developer. These are mostly around when you are requesting something, but they apply generally. Firstly, ask humbly. The company does not owe you anything. And what they do owe you, if they feel they do, will often be highly prized and help in your favor considerably. Explain your situation, and don't be afraid to speak openly and honestly. The decisions made are often emotional, and so you should appeal to that emotion. Talk to other employees, to people in other companies, so that you can get some idea on how things work both in your company and in their companies. Companies are much more helpful and much more considerate if you have helped them in the past. And this idea of helping the company is often misunderstood. Doing some extra or after hours work, the proverbial going over and above, is incredibly helpful. But it's not if you're wasting 3 to 4 hours during the day and then working late to make it up. It's also not helpful if you're demanding to be compensated by overtime pay or time back for every hour that you've put in. Then it's fair. It's not going over and above. You've given something and you've been compensated for it. And so you're not going to be considered as going over and above. However, an exception to this is if you're working hundreds of hours of overtime with no compensation, that is also not right. On that note, many companies will be happy to pay you as little as possible, but take advantage of you as much as they can and get away with it. Often, they can only get away with this because people don't know how unfairly they are treated. So again, speak to other people, know what the rest of the dev world is like. Now, I have a story about this, how I've seen this go so bad for one individual, despite the number of times I've spoken to them to try to encourage them to say, it is not right for you to be put through all of this. I worked in a company and we had a fairly junior individual who was there largely as a tester, as a sole tester in a team of about 5 or 6 senior developers. But it kind of made sense because our projects were very prototype style projects, so they largely generally needed to work. They did not need deep testing, wide coverage testing. They just generally needed to work. So one tester was able to manage. But what was not right was this individual will be out at customer sites 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. He would get messages from the boss at all times of the night, on weekends, with issues that clients are facing, and he essentially needs to go out and solve it. And this was not right. And I saw this happen month after month. He would work weeks and work weekends, and it was not healthy for him. And the sad thing is, he was an incredibly good tester. He was really smart. He would ask the right questions even before he opened an app to test. He would probably find an issue without looking at anything, just based on his knowledge, within the first 5 questions that he could ask, within the first 5 questions that he would ask. So that was amazing, and it was sad to see him essentially be abused, in my opinion, to this extent. So, good news, eventually he moved on. He's now in a fairly senior role where he is as a manager, and he is doing well. So that makes me happy, and I hope he really learned from that experience and doesn't get put into that position again. But these things happen, and the best way to try to be knowledgeable and try to know what is going on is to speak to other developers, speak to other individuals, and learn about the space that you're in. And again, this is the reason this community is here. This is the reason I'm trying to create this community, is not only for those who have little experience or no experience and are entering the workplace, but also for those who are experienced, who are senior, to come through and share their knowledge, for them to assist the juniors, and bring their knowledge and understanding and experience and share their stories with those of us who are looking to learn. All right, and then that kind of covers the topic for today. It's not as comprehensive as I would have liked. It has been a tough week, but if there are any questions, you're welcome to put them into chat. I see there are a question or two on the Discord server, so if you want to jump in there, you're welcome to drop your questions in there as well. I can see my bandwidth is flashing red and orange at me fairly regularly, so I suspect there are some video and audio issues for the live stream at the moment. But if you are watching this on YouTube, you probably won't see any of that because these are being recorded locally. All right, let's dig in. What do we have here? Right? With this whole COVID thing going on, I'm working from home. I find I am battling to sit down and work as I would from the office. Any tips to help me out? Okay, so since this lockdown has begun and since many developers are now working from home, I've seen any number of emails, tweets, videos about successfully working from home. Um, and there's a lot to it. And again, you got to kind of go through it and find what works for you and what doesn't work for you. For some people, it's about finding some silence, sitting for an hour, and then taking a break in a disciplined manner. For other individuals, it's about putting on some music, just sitting, spend 5 minutes, put on some good heart-pounding music, and amp yourself up and have a go. And that will maybe last you an hour or two. And then take a break and get back to it. So try to find what works for you. But also, a lot of it applies in the same way it applies at work, it applies at home as well. There is a differentiation between you being at home and you working at the office. And normally, it is a very it is a very physical differentiation because you're sitting at home and then you're sitting at the office. You need to try to create some of that at home. For those who spend a lot of time on their PC outside of work, that can be particularly troublesome. But there's some simple tricks and hacks that you can do to create the differentiation. One of those I've seen is the idea of changing your workspace. Your PC is your PC, and you can't really do much with your PC on a daily basis in terms of changing things. But what you can do is you can change the area around your PC. So if you're keeping a clean desk, for example, when it's your time to chill out, put one or two little pot plants in front of you. And mentally, that will become your downtime. And when it's work time, remove those pot plants and put one or two dev books in front of you. And again, these are just examples. But the idea is to try to break apart one space into this is the working time and this is the chilling time. So that can be very helpful. You can even go as far as to use two different chairs if you can. If it's your work time, maybe it's better for your posture, use a dining room chair. And when it's your chill out time, use your normal relaxing chair. And the idea being that you want to create this not just mental differentiation, but a physical differentiation between what is my work time and what is my chill time. If you have a laptop, that becomes a little bit easier because you're going to try to make sure you sit at it, perhaps the table or the dining room table when it's time to work. And then when it's not time to work, sit in the lounge, have a seat outside. Try to create these mental habits and follow them routinely, because you want them not to just become a mental game. You want them to become a habit, a mental association. And those are deeper and they take a bit of work to kind of get there. So this is not something you'll fix in a day or two, but it's a good habit to start. to help you be more productive at home. And it's going to become a race, because as these things continue and as more and more people are working from home, companies are going to become more and more freaked out. They have the sense of, okay, well, you should be working because we can see you. And let me tell you, very few developers get over 6 hours of work done in a day. And most of those developers, or most developers, would be very happy with 6 solid hours of work in a working day. And many companies realize this to some extent. But if you have to have this idea to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to do 6 hours of work at home, suddenly now it's a problem. It's like, no. Really, a lot of companies are like that, and it's because it's for them, it feels scary. They can't see you, they don't know what's going on. So from that perspective, you gotta try to become more productive than your peers, because as they get more panicky, you do not want to be on the short list. So that's something to keep in mind. But there's a lot of information out there. Many Google, YouTube lists on how to be more productive, especially since the lockdowns began around the globe. This became a very popular topic. So go through it. Spend an hour or two, read through some of these guides, go through some of the stuff, and try to get the idea behind what they're suggesting, the spirit of it, rather than the exact nature of what they're doing. And then take that spirit and see how you can apply that to your space, to your home. Just in the team that I work in, I've seen a number of people try different ideas on trying to manage this as they learn to work from home with their spouse also working from home. There's been any number of jokes and any number of memes about how I never knew my husband or my wife was this kind of person because I've never seen them in action and professionally. And so, when I understand, what, my husband's a manager, or a project manager. I have a vague idea of what he does, but to hear him on these calls and to see him in action, many spouses were not aware of this, and it became a kind of a meme and a running joke to see how different people react to these individuals. So there's lots of it going on. Spend some time, pick, even if you have to pick one, start off and say, okay, for this week, this is the one thing I'm going to do. This is the one idea I'm going to try. And let's see how it goes. And the next week, I can try a second one. And the week after that, a third one. But the idea is to continuously grow, continuously make progress, and continuously improve. Right, let's see. Next questions. Along the same lines, a lot of people are taking salary cuts and all that. What's the best way to handle a situation like this? Okay. This is a really tough one because there are no easy answers. Even the biggest companies are really reeling right now. It's a scary place for everyone. So you got to just simply try to make yourself as valuable as possible. But the reality is many of these scenarios may be out of your control. I've seen many companies do some such things as essentially ask individuals to either take leave or donate their leave during this time to try to help the finances of the company. So the way this works is that when an individual accumulates leave, the company is, in almost all cases, prepared to pay them out that leave if or when they're leaving. So they've essentially got to keep that cash on hand. By asking employees to donate their leave or to take their leave, that cash can return to their books for them to use for things like paying salaries, paying rent, and any number of things, to try to help with the drastically decreasing income in many cases. So yeah, to other extents, there's a lot depends on what the governments are doing to try to help companies. There's some funds that can try to help companies as well. But from the perspective of the developer, it's so much of it is out of your hands. If your company is in a really bad state, it's not going to, or rather, if your company is affected due to the lockdowns and things like that, you're not going to be in a kind of state. You're going to either be okay, you'll survive it, or you're going to be really, really bad. Like you don't have rent money, bad. So in those scenarios, or in either scenario, as a developer, it's largely out of your hands. Your company is going to do what your company is going to do, and the reality is we're probably heading into a really bad recession. The only difference is because of the lockdowns, because of the ways that different countries are trying to manage this. This is in the past, many of these kinds of economic recessions have been like at the speed of a falling stack of cards, a falling house of cards. It's happened very quickly. Within a few days, you've gone from like normal to like 90% of your recession. But that's not happening with this, because what's happening is as the lockdowns and things like that are occurring, many companies are kind of in this limbo state. They're kind of halted and they're not making any decisions until they can see how things are after the lockdown. Certainly that's what it looks like is happening in South Africa. Companies at the moment are many of them are waiting, are appealing to the government for assistance, for financial assistance, and based on how much of that comes through will determine how well they can kind of manage going into this recession. So it's going to be a really, really tough time, and all we can do is we can try to get the most benefit out of this time as we can. Just because you're not working or just because you're not getting paid does not mean you can't bring value. You may not be getting paid, but if you're not getting paid, chances are that almost no one in your company is getting paid. And so from that perspective, hopefully at some point the company will right itself, the economy will right itself. In some cases, companies have to adapt to this new world we're going into post the virus. So from that perspective, you got to still try to bring as much value as possible, because if they're not paying you, there are many companies out there that are not paying their employees. Um, and so for you to try to find work at this time is really tough. Is really tough, no matter where in the world you are, because economies are struggling, and many companies have gone into their own internal form of lockdown to say, okay, we're not committing money for anything, we're not making any decisions. This is the budget that we have. Hopefully, this budget will get us through through the worst of this recession, and based on that, we can get a much clearer idea of where we are a few months down the road, based on how the economy recovers, based on how the government can assist. As you say, every month that the government can assist and help a company to pay for their employees is another month that the economy is going to start getting stronger, or it's another set of hands to hold against the recession and slow it down. So that's the kind of scenario where we're in. And we're very fortunate where we are in South Africa. From what I've seen, our government has handled this crisis spectacularly, absolutely spectacularly. From the quick response in terms of lockdowns to always listening to the experts, following their advice, following their guidelines, and trying their best to ensure that people follow those guidelines, to the stimulus package that they've announced recently to try to help companies in South Africa, to try to help the economy from not going too deep of a recession. All of those are fantastic moves, and it's been shown in other countries that are more ahead in this process than we are. When they've acted fast, when they've acted well, their rates have been very low, their death rates have been very low, their economies are much stronger given the number of weeks that had passed than in other countries that have not reacted as well. So in that sense, it's as positive as it can be in South Africa. But there is no guidebooks. There's absolutely no guidebooks for how to manage in a dark time like this. Because the reality is, right now, I don't think anyone has a clear idea of just how dark it's going to get. Everything is kind of frozen during this lockdown, and once the lockdown ends, it's only then we're going to really start to see the repercussions of on the economy, on companies. How much momentum the dominoes are going to have as they start to fall is going to be determined at that point. Chances are, if you're in a bigger company, you're probably better off. But ultimately, it comes down to bringing value. If a company would rather fire 3 less valuable employees than 1 more valuable employee whom they pay more than any one of those 3. So they're also taking a big picture look at it in terms of, okay, who is bringing the most value here? For who is bringing the most bang for the buck? And it's not about the number of bucks they spend necessarily, but it's about getting the most value for every single buck that they spend. So not necessarily about the number of rands they're paying to an individual developer, but the amount of value they're getting for every rand that they're spending. That's what it comes down to. So you want to have that value for yourself as high as possible. So in this case, in these times, it may be more about focusing on the work, trying to get a little bit more than the 6 hours of work done in the day, and trying to be as clearly valuable directly to your company short term. Many companies will see value in things like, okay, yes, you're working on this web framework, but it's good to see you're watching YouTube videos about this other framework. Now is not that time, especially if your company is under stress. Now is the time to see, we want to see you doing 7 to 8 hours of work a day, even putting in the extra time for no compensation, because at the end of the day, the company needs to survive, and we need to do our best to help the company survive through these dark times. And that's all there is to it. But the reality is, companies can only do what they can do based on their budget. We're already seeing news stories like a number of companies are just going to the realtors and says, okay, we're not paying rent. That's it. We're simply not paying our rent because we don't have the money. And that's that. And it's a terrible position to be in, but it's, even the realtors have to look at it from the perspective of, okay, if we can absorb them not paying rent for maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, at least we know for the 5-year lease or for the 10-year lease, we still will probably get rent for the rest of the time, rather than trying to force the companies to pay the rent or to go to the position of even kicking them out of the premises. And then the company is going to go under and you're not going to see a single cent. So everyone has to try to think out of the box. No one's in a happy place right now. And it's going to get worse once the lockdown ends, before it gets better. That's for certain. So during that, something that came to mind is the idea of communication as an employee. In my first position out of university, I started at a company in an internship, and in that internship, the manager who I had was one of the best managers I've ever worked with, and the reason was because he was always very frank with me. He said what was on his mind. He was not harsh or hurtful about it. But he also, one of the best pieces of advice he told me is that if you have a problem, talk about it. Communication is the key to your survival and your success. So, along those same lines, there are many different levels that it applies to. There's, I have a concern or I have a thought and I want to speak to my manager. So that's almost more strictly from an employee perspective. Or I want to speak to HR. Do it. Don't delay. Don't worry about what everyone else is saying in the company. Don't worry about what the norm is. Don't worry about some other guy who went and complained about the same thing and no one did anything. If you have a concern, go and express that concern. So keep that in mind. Again, don't follow the herd. But there's also from the perspective of you as an individual and fairly representing yourself to your peers. And what I mean by that is you want to always communicate. Don't be the kind of person who's shy, doesn't talk, who's unnecessarily talked to. With respect, if you have a thought, if you have a question, ask it, say it, express yourself. And over time, not only will you see the value in that, but your company will see the value in that, because those individuals who can communicate well, who don't take things for granted, who are not afraid to push back with the aim of trying to get the best product possible, companies see the value in those individuals. And you have scenarios where people from a certain department will come to the dev side and say, okay, we want to make these enhancements. We want that person to do it for us. We want to have a meeting that's something we want to try to achieve. We want that person to be in that meeting because they will ask questions. They will ask critical questions that will push back against our ideas. But they will force us to think clearly about what we're attempting to do, rather than just doing it at a high level and hoping someone can figure out the details. Those individuals can become incredibly valuable to a company. And the way they do that is by learning to communicate, to talk when you have a thought, when you have a concern, when you have an idea. Speak up, bring it to the table. The worst thing that can happen is they will say, no, maybe that's not a style that I like. But again, be respectful, be humble, know your place in the system. Don't want to be there as a junior developer sitting in a project with high-level managers and you're going about it the wrong way. We understand that you want to try to communicate and represent yourself in the room, but it doesn't change the fact that you're a junior in a room with a number of high-level managers. They will barely see you there, and the only way you're going to really represent yourself is by bringing value to the discussion. So kind of learn to draw that line, to see and understand the room and ask your questions. But at the same time, that's not to say you don't represent yourself. If you don't do it in that room, after the meeting, put together an email and say, hi, we chatted about this. Hi, Mr. Project Manager, or hi, Mr. Team Leader. You know, I was in this meeting and I had these two thoughts, so I'm just going to put them here. Let me know what you think. And there you go. And you never know, those two thoughts may be incredibly valuable. They may be incredibly critical. And in so many of the scenarios, it's about just building and fleshing out that mental space to solving a problem. Your particular suggestion may not seem very valuable right now, but 6 weeks down the line, when they're actually putting together mock-ups of screens that's going to go into the system, someone will remember, oh wait, but this thing that I'm trying to do is not working. But this thing that this other guy suggested a while back, that will work here brilliantly. So it's about putting all of these ingredients into this mental space, into the solution space of a problem. And so when you're actually defining the problem, you have as many tools as possible, as many parts as possible to try to build the best products at the end of the day. So contribute even in that manner. Communicate, represent yourself, do it respectfully, do it humbly. So that will go a long way towards helping you on many different levels throughout your career. And it's the kind of advice that will work almost no matter what career you're in, whether you're in dev or any other career. If you have that attitude, you can often do well. Having said that, there's a place for it and there's a place that's not for it. If you're ever in politics, if you're ever in upper management, directors, CEOs, the mental space there is extremely different. And you will have left the employee mindset far behind when you reach those levels. So that's just something to keep at the back of your mind. It's not a silver bullet, because there are scenarios where even that advice is not the best advice. So yeah, again, any other questions, please feel free to drop them in chat. Like I've said before, we're trying to create a community here to help those who are not knowing what they're walking into. There's one of the reasons I've started creating this community is because there's a lot of misinformation. One person will hear one strange story from their second cousin who's a tester working with this one developer, and suddenly the whole campus thinks that this is what software development is going to be like when they enter the working world, and it's not. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of lack of information. There's when people get advice from lecturers, from recruiters, from managers whom they may encounter, they struggle to take that advice and bring it and get value out of it, because like I've said before, they don't understand these environments that they're going into. They don't understand what they think they're doing is not the same as what managers and other developers are perceiving, simply because they don't have an understanding of the environments that they work in. So we're creating this community to help students, to help interns, to help juniors. But honestly, there are many intermediates and seniors even who have not given much thought to many of these topics, and so there is some value to be gained here even for them. So it's about a community, it's about helping people. So yes, we have the Discord server. Link is just, if you just scroll down in Twitch, otherwise if you check the description in YouTube, pop in, come say hi, ask your questions, see what people are chatting about, and just be a part of the discussion. It's all about sharing knowledge. If you can't make the live streams, my videos are uploaded to YouTube. Again, if you scroll down, the links are there. So come in, say hi. Feel free to comment on the videos, ask your questions, raise your concerns. Everyone brings a different perspective. Those who have very little knowledge bring their own experience, bring their own perspective. Those who don't like what they hear, don't understand what they hear, bring their own perspective through their questions, and every bit helps. So be a part of the community. Come say hi. Yeah, I think that about covers it. It surprises me every single time how it feels like, I'm not even going to make it half an hour through the talk today, and before you know it, it's an hour and 15 minutes that have passed. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming and saying hi, being part of the community. What? Oh no. Okay, Keenan, on that note, I am going to end the stream. Again, thanks everybody, and let's go from good code to a great career together. Peace out.